Welcome back. If you're new here, in North 10, this is where we have honest, real conversations about attraction, female psychology, emotional connection, and how relationships genuinely work in today's world. And today we're diving into something that most men completely misunderstand about women and attraction. A lot of men believe that the more effort they put in, the more emotionally valuable they become to a woman. So they keep texting first. They keep checking in. They keep showing up consistently, making themselves entirely available, because somewhere deep inside they believe that the moment they stop, she will simply move on and forget them completely. But here is what most men are never told. Sometimes, the exact moment a man stops chasing is the precise moment a woman truly begins feeling his presence emotionally. Because when someone becomes completely predictable, constantly available, and always there without any uncertainty, the human mind naturally stops paying the same quality of attention. But the moment that familiar energy suddenly shifts, something activates internally. Her thoughts become louder, her emotions become more engaged, and questions she never once had to ask herself begin appearing naturally inside her mind. Because what actually happens psychologically inside a woman's mind when a man withdraws his energy is far deeper than most men have ever been told. So let's go through it carefully today. The first thing that happens when you stop chasing is her mind becomes significantly louder, not quieter. And this is the part most men never actually see. Because from the outside, everything may look completely unchanged. She still posts normally, she still seems unbothered, and so most men instantly conclude she moved on, stopped caring, or simply forgot about them entirely. But psychologically, that is rarely what is happening beneath the surface. When your attention was constant, your presence gradually became emotionally predictable to her. Not necessarily unwanted, but expected. She knew you would text first. She knew you would reach out. She knew your emotional energy would always be there, regardless of what she did or didn't do. And because of that deep certainty, she never had to fully sit with your absence. But the moment you quietly stop chasing, something shifts internally. Her mind starts generating questions it never needed to ask before. Why did his energy change? Did something happen? Is he interested in someone else now? Why do I suddenly notice his absence more than I expected to? And this is where many women begin thinking about a man far more deeply than they ever did while he was constantly available. Because absence creates emotional awareness in ways that constant presence simply cannot replicate. The second thing that happens when you stop chasing is she begins questioning everything she believed she understood about you. And honestly, this carries more emotional weight than most men realize, because certainty keeps people emotionally relaxed, while uncertainty forces the mind into active engagement. Before you pulled back, you were easy for her to read. She knew you liked her. She knew your attention was reliable. And because of that emotional comfort, she never truly had to think about you at a deeper level. You became someone she understood without effort. But the moment that pursuit quietly disappears, her perception of you begins shifting entirely. Now she starts wondering whether she had you figured out correctly at all. Did I misread him? Was I more distant than I realized? Did I take his energy for granted? Was he actually more emotionally significant than I gave him credit for? And here is the psychological truth about this. Discomfort creates emotional engagement. The moment certainty disappears from a dynamic, emotional curiosity naturally starts expanding to fill that space. She begins revisiting old conversations with completely different eyes. Small moments that felt ordinary before suddenly carry new meaning. Even your silence begins feeling emotionally significant inside her mind. And this is exactly where many women slowly become far more intrigued by a man they previously thought they had completely understood. The third thing that happens when you stop chasing is your absence gradually becomes more emotionally compelling than your constant presence ever managed to be. Many men struggle accepting this because they genuinely believe attraction only deepens through more effort, more attention, and greater availability. But human psychology simply does not always operate that way emotionally. When someone knows they can access your attention at any moment without any real uncertainty, your presence slowly becomes emotionally familiar. Not rejected, just no longer actively noticed. She knows you will reply. She knows you will initiate. She knows the connection will stay alive because you will always be there carrying it. But the moment that predictable pattern disappears, your emotional value begins feeling different to her psychologically. Now there is genuine uncertainty, and uncertainty creates emotional attention automatically. She starts noticing your absence in places where your energy used to exist. She notices when you no longer reach out first. She notices when the familiar warmth of your attention is no longer surrounding her emotionally the same way it used to. And honestly, that space often makes your presence feel more powerful than it ever did before, because now she finally has room to feel what is genuinely missing. People almost always recognize emotional value most clearly after constant availability disappears. The fourth thing that happens when you stop chasing is she finally begins confronting her actual feelings for you, rather than simply reacting to your attention. And this is where things become psychologically significant, because many women do not fully recognize their emotional attachment to a man while he is actively and consistently pursuing them. When you are always chasing, her emotional role stays passive. She does not need to examine her internal feelings because your attention is already keeping the connection alive. She can simply receive your effort without ever deeply asking herself what she actually feels. But the moment your pursuit stops, something changes. Now she faces a question she was previously able to avoid entirely. Do I actually miss him? Or do I only miss the validation and attention he was giving me? And many women are genuinely surprised by the answer they discover inside themselves. Suddenly, small things begin triggering emotional reactions she did not anticipate. A memory brings your presence back into her awareness. A song reminds her of your energy. She finds herself checking her phone and noticing a quiet feeling when your name does not appear, even if she would never admit that openly. This is where real emotional attachment becomes visible for the first time, because now the feelings are emerging from within her own internal experience, not from your constant pursuit emotionally surrounding her from the outside. The fifth thing that happens when you stop chasing is she often feels your silence far more deeply than she will ever openly admit. And this is where many men become genuinely confused, because externally she may still appear completely calm, composed, and emotionally unaffected. So naturally, men assume that nothing about their absence registered at all. But psychologically, people are remarkably skilled at concealing emotional impact, particularly when pride, vulnerability, and emotional uncertainty become intertwined. Because admitting your absence affected her means admitting she cared more than she allowed herself to show. And for many women, that is a deeply uncomfortable place to sit emotionally. So instead of expressing it outwardly, she internalizes it quietly. She notices whether you viewed her stories. She notices when you are clearly online but choose not to reach out. She replays conversations privately. She mentally rehearses what she might say if you were to suddenly contact her again. And none of this becomes visible externally. On the surface, she may appear entirely composed, but internally, your silence is often creating far more emotional movement than you could ever observe from the outside. Because people who truly feel nothing do not quietly monitor someone's absence. The sixth thing that happens when you stop chasing is you finally begin clearly seeing her genuine level of interest rather than remaining trapped inside emotional confusion. And this is one of the most psychologically important parts of this entire conversation, because constant chasing frequently hides the real truth from men. When you are always initiating, always carrying the emotional energy of the connection, she never truly has to reveal how much effort she is genuinely willing to invest. Your pursuit keeps everything moving forward, so her real emotional investment stays quietly hidden in the background, comfortable and unexamined. But the moment you step back, the dynamic shifts completely. Now she has to make a genuine internal decision. Does she actually want to maintain this connection emotionally, or was she simply enjoying the steady stream of attention, validation, and emotional comfort you were consistently providing? And what happens next tells you everything you need to know. A woman who genuinely feels emotionally connected will typically find some way to reestablish contact, even subtly. A message, a reaction, a casual reason to begin conversation again. Because the idea of your presence disappearing entirely does not sit comfortably within her. But if nothing happens, then as painful as that truth feels, you finally have clarity instead of prolonged confusion. And clarity, even when it hurts, is always healthier than endlessly pursuing someone who was never genuinely moving toward you. The seventh thing that happens when you stop chasing is she finally offers you her real emotional attention. And this is the deepest misunderstanding most men carry about attraction, because they believe that constant pursuit keeps a woman emotionally focused on them. But psychologically, the opposite is frequently what happens. When everything is predictable, emotionally available, and completely guaranteed, the mind relaxes. There is no emotional tension, no uncertainty, no curiosity creating deeper engagement. Your attention simply becomes integrated into her normal emotional routine. But the moment you stop chasing, her emotional awareness activates. Now she notices your absence. Now she notices the quiet. Now she notices the space where your energy used to live. And this is where many women begin thinking about a man with far greater emotional intensity than before, because now their own internal feelings are actively engaged instead of passively receiving attention from the outside. And listen to this carefully, because it is the most important thing in this entire conversation. This is not about manipulation. This is not about emotional games or creating artificial distance to make someone panic. A man who stops chasing because he genuinely values his own peace, his own priorities, and his own emotional self-respect naturally becomes more emotionally compelling, because his entire internal energy transforms. And women feel that transformation immediately. Because a man who is emotionally consumed by chasing often radiates anxiety, scattered energy, and an unspoken need for external validation without fully realizing it. But a man focused on his own purpose, his own stability, his own internal peace, naturally carries a grounded, calm, emotionally secure energy that is genuinely attractive without any performance involved. So after everything we explored today, here's what I want you to walk away understanding clearly. Stopping the chase is never about revenge. It is never about trying to manipulate someone's emotions or force a reaction. The real shift is far more personal and psychologically meaningful than that. A man who constantly chases someone who is not equally choosing him begins slowly abandoning himself in the process. His emotional state becomes dependent on replies, validation, and reassurance from someone else. And over time, that dependency quietly erodes his confidence, his peace, and his genuine sense of self-worth. But the moment a man stops chasing and genuinely redirects his focus back toward his own life, something real begins shifting internally. He becomes calmer, more emotionally grounded, less reactive to external validation. And that shift, that authentic internal change, is often precisely when women begin feeling his emotional value far more powerfully than they ever did before. Because healthy attraction grows most naturally when two people are freely and willingly moving toward each other, not when one person is carrying the entire emotional weight of a connection alone. The right woman will never require you to endlessly pursue her just to recognize what you bring. She will naturally respond to your presence, your emotional stability, your genuine consistency, without you ever having to abandon yourself simply to hold her attention. Now, I genuinely want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever stopped chasing someone and noticed their entire energy toward you change afterward? Drop your experience below, because these conversations matter. And if you value these discussions about female psychology, attraction, emotional intelligence, and how modern relationships genuinely work, subscribe and become part of this community, because the conversations ahead are going even deeper into human behavior, emotional dynamics, and the psychology behind real attraction.